Madam Chair, you are live. The floor is yours.
Good morning, citizens of Douglas County, and to the Board of Commissioners, good morning as well. Thank you, Board of Commissioners, for joining and accepting this meeting, a special call meeting, which is today is Monday, August 8th, 2022. It is now 10:07 a.m. And again, I apologize to the citizens for starting a little late. Certainly we are experiencing technical difficulty. But at this time, we are in good shape, it's my understanding, so we should be okay and out of the woods with our technical difficulty. Board of Commissioners, I'll start this morning with roll call. I'll start with District 1 Commissioner Henry Mitchell III.
Present.
District 2 Commissioner and Vice Chairman Kelly Robinson. It's my understanding he's trying to get on. We'll move on to District 3 Commissioner Terenia Carthen.
Present.
District 4 Commissioner Ann Jones-Spider.
Present.
Okay, and Mona Jackson Jones, Chairwoman, present. Board of Commissioners, we do have an established quorum to conduct business this morning. Again, I would just like to reiterate, I'm just thankful that this body was able to meet again so we could address this time-sensitive matter. We have before us this morning a business item, and it is tab number 1, resolution of the Board of Commissioners calling for a referendum imposing a 1% special purpose local option sales tax, which is SPLOST, as authorized by the state of Georgia, and approval of related intergovernmental agreement, and authorize the chairman to sign all related documents. Certainly this morning, I want to yield the floor to our attorney, Michael Coleman, to allow him to engage in discussions regarding this matter, and also David Corbin, who's he's our financial advisor. So you have the floor, Attorney Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This special call meeting is necessitated by negotiations that started over the weekend with the attorneys representing the cities in the county regarding the proposed SPLOST referendum and changes that they wanted to make. There were 2 principal changes they wanted to make to the intergovernmental agreement. The first one was they wanted the population to be based on, the percentage allocations to be based on population. The earlier drafts that we had sent out used the same percentages that had been used previously. I do not believe that request is unreasonable, that it be based on population, but ultimately it's the board's decision. The second request was there's a paragraph in the intergovernmental agreement that states that the cost sharing obligations of the city of Douglasville and the city of Villa Rica, as set forth in the service delivery agreements that were negotiated by the parties several years ago, could be discharged using SPLOST proceeds. The service delivery agreements provided that the cities of Villa Rica and the city of Douglasville would be responsible for capital outlay projects in fire and EMS based on a percentage of based on their population percentage. And that agreement further provided that those obligations would be discharged using a portion of the SPLOST proceeds from the 2 of those cities. So while that agreement provided for the use of SPLOST proceeds, the SPLOST statute states that if you're going to use SPLOST proceeds, it has to be reflected in the IGA, which is the intergovernmental agreement. And they wanted that paragraph deleted from the intergovernmental agreement. So based on the last communication I had from them, they wanted the intergovernmental agreement amended to delete section 7G, or they would not agree to go forward. I don't know if that's changed. I communicated with them this morning to see if this position has changed, because I've asked them to further analyze that Section 7G, and I think it probably benefits the cities, in my view, more than the county. But I think they wanted it deleted. So that would mean if they wanted it deleted and we were unwilling to delete it, that would mean that we would not have an IGA. Under the SPLOST statute, without an IGA, you can only collect for 5 years. However, the city of the county is able to deduct 20% off the top to take care of countywide capital projects. So consequently, we're left with the decision of, do we go with the IGA without the 7G and a population-based allocation? Or do we go with the IGA, insist on the IGA with 7G, delete it, or I'm sorry, with 7G in it, in which case the cities have not agreed to that? Or do we simply go for 5 years with 20% off the top? Those are really kind of the three options. If we're prepared to go forward with the intergovernmental agreement based on population without the paragraph 7G, then my understanding is that they would agree to it and we could collect for 6 years because we'll have an IGA. My current understanding is that if we do not have the 7G, or if we have the 7G in the IGA, they will not agree to it, which means we won't have an IGA and we'll be able to collect only for 5 years. And so that's really kind of, where we are. These decisions, I'm sorry to bring it to you at the last minute, but they were raised on Thursday. They continued up until 2 minutes ago when I got an email from the Douglasville attorney wanting to change Douglasville's internal percentages, which is tough to do. But we will try to do it before we have to send this over to the newspaper for publication today. We can probably adjust their internal percentages, but to show you that negotiations have been going up right up until the end. It's literally, in fact, I just got another email from one of the city attorneys. So this is, that's where we are. So we have to make a decision. I've tried to convey that we have to make a decision. I've sent 2 emails saying at the last minute, do we have the IGA? And at this point, the last communication I have is that we have the IGA only so long as 7G is deleted. That they've not changed from that position. So I think the decision we have to make really is, do we go with the IGA without the 7G and then collect over 6 years, or we go with the IGA, go to an IGA with 7G, in which case we don't have an IGA and we will simply be collecting only for 5 years, a no IGA scenario. So those are the decisions. Now, I know that's all very confusing, and I like to try to respond to questions quickly. So I'll stop now, Madam Chair, and wait until there are questions. David, I know you are on. I don't know if you have anything to add to that description of where we are.
Thank you so much, Attorney.
No, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I think you accurately described it, Attorney.
So that's where we are. Any questions from any of the board members? There are certain aspects of this 7G and the obligation of the cities to pay us for capital outlay projects that could be subject to litigation. And we, depending on questions, we may need to go into executive session, but hopefully we can get through them without doing that because we're on a very, very tight time crunch. So I'd like to now, again, Madam Chair, step aside and see if there are questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Attorney Coleman. Board of Commissioners, Do you have any questions for Attorney Coleman at this time? Okay.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Okay, Convido, you have the floor.
Okay. Let's go again around this circle here. You're saying that the cities want to pay for capital projects, like a new fire truck or a new ambulance or something like that, out of their percentage of the splash.
They have, that's what the service delivery agreement provided for. There was a negotiated several years ago. It provided for them paying for that out of their share of the SPLOST. But they have requested that section be deleted. And
But they still want to do that. They still want to do it, but they don't want it in this agreement.
IGA. Yeah, but under the law, it can't be, you can't have it unless it's in the IGA. You can't use SPLOST proceeds unless it's in the IGA that you're going to use them that way. So even though they have agreed to pay for their share of capital projects out of SPLOST proceeds in the service delivery agreement, they don't want that obligation to be reflected in the IGA, but under the law, it has to be. So that's not really, it's kind of intuitive, but that's kind of what the negotiations have been and kind of where we are. And I've asked them a couple of times for clarity as to where we are, and I haven't gotten that.
Have they expressed why they don't want it in there, yet they want to be able to do it?
Well, I think that I think there was some misunderstanding about whether or not it needed to be in there.
Because it's in the old service delivery.
Because it's in the old service delivery agreement, they understood that it didn't need to be in the IGA, but at this point,
You're saying the law says it has to be in the IGA.
yes.
Okay.
I mean, the law says that, as I read the law, I mean, the provision states that it should be allocated as set forth in the IGA. I mean, that's what it says. So, I mean, that's kind of what it says to me.
Okay, and as far as population, going by population, that's what the county wanted the last time, was for it to be based on population.
I don't think that request is unreasonable at all.
I just wanted to I was there
Right.
during the last one, and I do know that that's what the county was asking for to begin with. So, I'd be fine with that. I just don't understand why they object to this verbiage being in the IGA. And although they want to be able to do that. So
I think that's right. Now, I'm seeing there's a chat message from the staff attorney for Douglasville, who also explained Douglasville's position. Go ahead, David.
No, again, and with respect to everyone on the call, part of the trouble, part of the issue at this point is from the seeking understanding or working through this issue. Madam Guider, the provisions in the IGA are mirror those which are in the shared service delivery agreement, and that agreement references the fact the SPLOST. So again, they've been there. We've had 2 more years left remaining on the SDS agreement. If the SDS agreement doesn't exist, it can always be language that carves it out of the IGA at that point. But, the reality of it is that, we haven't been given a whole lot of time to adequately vet this issue as it relates to SDS and loss and all the other items, because we've always been told that they wanted to keep them separately, and that there were no problems with these provisions. This is the first that I've heard of the problem with it, or was an issue of concern.
could we, instead of putting that paragraph in there, could we not refer to the paragraph in the SDS?
Well,
There is
it's-
a reference already in the agreement saying it doesn't change the obligations under the SDS. I'm not sure, that doesn't specifically reference though the obligation to use SPLOS proceeds. It's kind of an indirect reference. It may be that works. I think it's not clear cut. It doesn't reference the expenditures of SPLOS proceeds. And it, someone would have to go back and search the idea. The idea is to give the public the idea of how to proceed, some idea of how the proceeds would be to be spent. They'd have to go back and find the SDS and see what the obligations are to know. So I think it's much better to have it in this section 7G. However, if we want to proceed, collect for 7 years without the 7G and rely on that, that's fine. What that would mean is that if someone says that, well, that's not describing that use of the proceeds, then, we'd be stuck with not being able to use SPLOS proceeds for capital obligations, and the cities would still have to come up with that somewhere else. Now, I will point out that if we go forward without, and I don't know, well, I think the cities will agree to the IGA if we take the 7G out. That's the last communication I had. And if we want to do that and collect for 6 years, we can do that. And perhaps the cross-reference to the service delivery agreement, the language basically says nothing in herein discharges the obligations of any other agreements, including the service delivery agreements. And it describes them, but it's not a specific reference to the expenditure of SPLOS funds, and someone would have to go find that to know that. But we can still argue that is sufficient. It may not be, I question it, but it might be. So that is an option.
There is a Miranda Jordan that wants to clarify their position.
Yes.
Is that possible that we can hear, let them speak? Or now Marcia Hampton, Vice Mayor, I think. She's
She's the city manager.
city manager, okay.
Marsha Hampton is. So what we can do, are you finished speaking?
Yield back, yeah.
Okay, you yield back, okay.
Let me point out one other thing. If we go forward with no IGA and only collect for 5 years, we're still in a position that without an IGA, we can't really use the SPLOS funds to reimburse capital outlay projects in that event either. So it may be, delete the 7G may be still an acceptable approach for you to take. Because even without it, we still would have the same problem without an IGA. And that is that it's not described in the IGA. So that would also be an approach to take.
Thank you so much, Attorney Coleman. I certainly want to yield the floor. I believe the attorney from the city.
Madam Chair?
Vice Chair Robinson.
Yes. Sorry I wasn't online earlier. Apologize to my peers. Before we hear from them, let us finish having our conversation amongst ourselves. I think for protocol, this has to be a debate amongst the Board of Commissioners. And so at this point, let's finish that process. I'm going to weigh in. From my perspective, I'm fine like now got a population. I'm pretty consistent through all 3 SPLOS population. Keep it simple. So I don't have a problem with that. As it relates to this paragraph here, this provision, there has to be some type of reference to tie them together. You can't let them be exclusive. There's a reason that was in there last time. Like you want to do what's called alignment. And so to your point, County Attorney, indirect is fine. And I liked your latter one, which is flip it. As opposed to the way it was in there originally, just flip it the other way to make reference to it. But you need that in there. So I would say put in there, but you can invert it. For my peers, I'm comfortable if in fact, with 5 years, I'm one way or another about the business of the people. I don't want to get too caught up on a single paragraph or provision. I'm gonna say it again. I don't want to get caught up in a paragraph, right? And this should not be a deal breaker per se. Now we are, again, accommodating at the last minute. I don't know who blinked. Really don't care. We're here now. So last minute, I mean, yeah, we're smart enough, but still, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that this is like, okay, really, guys, right? This is so. But duly noted, it's going the way I wanted to go, which is population. So I can concede on that point, or at least agree. Population is fine. My second point, along with that, is that I think population should extend all the way across the other agreements. That's just my position. Right? Trying to negotiate, like, okay, guys, y'all get away from this. And so you want population for revenue and then something else for your expenses. Okay. I get it. It's whatever the will of the board is. I'm fine. But just so you know where I'm at on those other two. I think we'll just hold it there. I mean, it's pretty quick. It didn't take long for this to understand where we are. The analysis is dead on point. I get the money. I get the spread. So I'm going to go ahead and yield back. I'm sure that's long enough. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Vice Chair. Any other comments, Board of Commissioners? Okay. There are no comments at this time. I'm going to yield the floor to the city manager. I understand that the county attorney has yielded her time to the city manager, Marshall Hampton. Marshall Hampton, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Board of Commissioners. And I just want to provide a brief bit of clarity on that paragraph that has been referenced in the meeting. The purpose for reworking the language in the paragraph was due to the city of Douglasville's desire for its portion of the public safety proceeds to go towards several major projects in this current proposed SPOS that we weren't able to do in the 2016 SPOS due to the financial commitment for fire and for the cell tower, or I should say the radio tower, if you all remember. So the reason we sent in a last minute request this morning to change the percentages was due to the fact that if we were going to have to keep that paragraph in, and the way that the percentage, the formula works, we would have to increase our portion of public safety proceeds to accommodate fire. The reason we did not think that we needed to accommodate fire as much this time, because we still have a total of $3.3 million remaining in funds held aside from the 2016 SPOS for fire and EMS. That adjusted budget went from 4.4 million to approximately 3.3 million. As of today, you all have spent $1.17 million. So because we still have that significant amount remaining, and as sales taxes increase, you know, that number adjusts based on the percentages. So Douglasville thought it was best to utilize the majority of its public safety funds for the police department and several of their major projects, since those things were held in abeyance in 2016. So however the language is written to accommodate that, the desire for us as the city is to, we have the money set aside for fire. We just want to make certain that police is taken care of in the 2022 SPOS. So that is the reason for the back and forth in the language, just based on how the language is written in 2016, and it seems fairly convoluted, and it doesn't provide a lot of clarity, but we still have a significant pot of money provided for fire.
If I could respond very briefly, Ms. Hampton, we will work in your revised percentages that you sent this morning. I think we can get those in and still make our deadlines. But what's not clear to me yet is whether or not the cities want to go forward with 7G in or out of the IGA. The last communication I got from your council was that it was to be deleted. And that will impact whether or not we collect for 5 or 6 years. we could go forward with it, delete it, if that's your preference. And if the board votes to do that, then I think that, we can still go forward for 6 years if we delete that paragraph. But it's still not clear what your current position is on that paragraph.
The last one that I read, Attorney Coleman, it tied to the language to the previous 2016 SPLOST. And for us, that meant that we would have to hold, probably based on the percentage and the projections that are slated, which I believe the projections are similar to what they were in 2016, we would have to hold aside at a minimum, basically $4.5 million. And based on the proposed projects for public safety, it would basically put those projects to the side. And if there's a way to rework that wording so that it does not tie to that formula, I think we would be satisfied to do that. But if it ties back to that formula for 2016, the direction that I'm getting from the mayor and council is that we're just not financially prepared to do that based on the police projects that we have to move forward in the future on.
Okay. Well, it hadn't been presented to me any request to revise the language of 7G. That was not to rework it as you described. I mean, what you're suggesting sounds reasonable to me, and I would, I think we could work to redo that language. We just can't do it before our deadline today. However, we really don't, as long as we know we have an agreement on an IGA, we really don't have to have the language nailed down precisely on that, so long as we're able to do that before it's presented to you guys, your boards, for approval. And I would endeavor to try, if it's the desire of the board, to go forward with 7G in and have the IGA with that language reworked as you described. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's probably something that's we could work to do and get it done in the next week or so. But we've got to know whether or not we're going to go 5 or 6 years, like soon, so we can get the information out for publication.
And as I stated, I think the point that the council members wanted to make was we do have money set aside for fire. So it's not as if we're excluding fire from capital outlay, but we have it. But we do have some other projects in the public safety arena that we put aside to allow for this. So we were hopeful that in 2022, that wording could be rewritten to acknowledge several of our police projects that we have going forward. And if you all can do that, we'd appreciate it. But understanding that the decision rests with the Board of Commissioners.
So just to be clear, Ms. Hampton, I'm sorry that I'm not being as clear as, or not following this clearly. Are you suggesting that you'd be prepared to recommend the IGA if that language is reworked to accommodate the monies you already have in place, so that you can reduce the obligation you might have for capital expenditure? You would be willing to recommend the IGA going forward with 7G in it, or would you still a position that it come out? I'm just trying to get that narrowed down.
I would be willing to recommend that to the city council members, acknowledging, those funds that are there, that we do have funds set aside for fire. And, I'll just state, one of the major projects we have in public safety is, potentially a training course, public safety training course, which is not just beneficial for the city, but for all on the west side of town. So if there's a way to acknowledge what proceeds are currently existing, and the acknowledgement that, that we are still collecting proceeds in this amount, and that they are held for the purposes of fire and EMS solely, and that we're not utilizing these funds for anything else, I would definitely be supportive of recommending that to the city council.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that clarity. And I'm going to ask David or Rosalind Miller to chime in. I mean, I understand that some of that money that you've got set aside will be billed shortly. I mean, there are apparently projects for this SPLOST that will use, you know, a big chunk of the bulk of those proceeds once you're invoiced. And my understanding is that, you know, that's in the works, but I'll ask either David or Rosalind to speak to that, because that might impact the amount of reworking and the amount that's left there. So David or Rosalind, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you so much, Attorney Coleman. David, to add, and I was, when that conversation took place last night, I was wondering if we had some encumbrances tied to that 3.5 million. So things is already in the oven that may really shave that 3 million down that you alluded to, City Manager. So if you could speak, David Corbin, you have the floor, Chief Financial Advisor.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Miller to comment on that portion, because we've been tracking that and monitoring it. So, Ms. Miller, are you on?
Good morning. Yes. To my understanding is that the 2016 SPLOST and the 3 million that Ms. Hampton is speaking of is based off of the 2016 SPLOST budget for fire, and not all projects have been completed. As you know, some projects have has been put on hold for them to move forward with other projects. And one of the projects is a big budget item project. So the 20 million not to exceed that is in the IGA, that will still be, that's obligated. We still anticipate to bill the city for at least the 3 million for the 2016 fire SPLOST budget. So for 2022 SPLOST, we have other projects that for fire, and currently there are a little over $25 million of capital items that this fire department has identified. So I see them separate. I see the 2016 has been obligated. We will bill the city for the amount that they have record of, remaining, and then we're now trying to negotiate the 2022 SPLOST, which again, fire has a budget, SPLOST budget of 25 million. I hope that was clear.
Thank you so much, Rosalind. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Guida, you have the floor.
Attorney Coleman, could we not just put an effective date in that paragraph in the IGA?
Yes, ma'am. We've done that, Madam Guider. We have an effective date of September 15th on the IGA, to give us a chance to kind of finish polishing that up. But we gotta, know whether or not we're going to have an agreement, because once we publish that we're going to go for 6 years, and then if something major comes up on the IGA that we can't get it finished, major issues like this, then we don't have an IGA. And
this is what I'm, you're addressing something entirely different. I mean,
okay.
That paragraph about the capital costs coming out of their SPLOST, just put a date of that paragraph, effective date. Yeah, understand what I'm saying? That way it doesn't affect any prior.
Yeah, we could do that. I think that the point that is being made by Rosalind is that, if we make it, I'm not sure what effective date you have in mind, but if we clarify that the that the funds that are being held are for the 2016 SPLOS projects, and that there will be additional projects going forward in under the 2022 SPLOS. There still remains the question of whether or not Douglasville would be willing to pay for their share of those out of SPLOS proceeds. They've agreed to do that in the service delivery agreement up until that agreement expires. And maybe thereafter, I haven't studied that, but they've agreed to do that. The question is just, do we need to keep, are we willing to go forward with I don't know what the language would be to in terms of the effective date that you're discussing. That's not real clear how that changes the situation.
What about if at the end of the current service delivery agreement?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I would have no problem with that at the end of the current service delivery agreement, assuming there's not a new one. Then yeah, I think that would make sense.
Okay, just a suggestion. You're
Yes,
the
that makes
attorney.
sense.
I'll leave it up to you.
No, I think that makes sense, and I think Ms. Corbin and I had discussed that, and I've actually suggested that in some of the correspondence with the city's lawyers, that we would, put a provision in the case that it expires at the end of the current service delivery agreement. I've actually suggested that in correspondence to the city's lawyers.
Thank
And
you.
if that, okay, thank you. And I like to just caution that we're getting close to a point where we got to take a vote and figure out what we're going to do here.
Okay. Well, first of all, the Board of Commissioners, do we have any further comments? And if not, certainly I want to, before we take a vote, Attorney Coleman, I just want to just check to see if there's a need to go into executive session.
I think, Madam Chair, there are some litigation aspects of this that we may want to just discuss in a very brief executive session, just pertaining to the ability to collect the capital outlay obligations. So if we could do it very, very briefly, we could do that and discuss that and get back here and take a vote.
Okay, and then I'll call the question at that point.
Okay.
Well, Board of Commissioners, do you have any other further comment before I call question for executive session? Board of Commissioners, do we have a motion to go into executive session?
Moved.
Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, Board? We have a motion and a second. When I call your districts, please respond. District 1.
Yes.
District 2.
Yes.
District 3.
Yes.
District 4.
Yes.
Chairman, yes, we have a 5-0 unanimous vote, and the motion carries to go into executive session. Citizens of Douglas County and also our directors, we will engage in executive session, and we will return, and I'm going to say that at this point momentarily. Okay, with that being said, Clerk, you have the floor to move us into our executive session.
You are back. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sierra. This is, again, thank you, citizens of Douglas County, for your patience, and also our executive team for just waiting patiently as we engaged in the executive session. Attorney Coleman certainly wanted to yield to you to allow you to reference some information.
Yeah, I like if Ms. Hampton is still on the line, I'd like to ask her one quick question, and then I really urge us to go ahead and take the vote. Ms. Hampton, with respect to going forward with an IGA, with the understanding that we're going to negotiate to rework the language of 7G to address your concerns. And we also have an understanding that if we are not able to come up with satisfactory language, then we would go forward with the IGA without 7G. In which case, the cities would have to discharge their obligations for capital outlay for fire and EMS through other methods if we delete 7G. That would be, so the understanding is we'll try to rework the language, and if we're not able to come up with satisfactory language, we'll just delete 7G and keep the IGA in place. Because once we commit now to have the IGA, if that's the vote, I don't know what it'll be, but if it is, then we got to have the IGA. And either we have that paragraph in or out. And if it's out, you should understand that the county would be left to collect this portion of those capital outlay obligations through some other method. Is that something that you are agreeable with? Willing to make that caveat?
We do. The city understands that. The one thing I would ask, and not that, not to hold the vote, and we had asked this before just for consideration as you look at that paragraph of reworking that. There really is no benefit for the city to hold those funds. So it may benefit the Board of Commissioners that for the amount that we have in our coffers here at the city, that in reworking that language, that we transfer that total amount to you all. We don't have any say-so over how you spend that money. Your capital funds, we're just holding it. So I would just toss that out there as well. But we do understand that if capital outlay is to be expended for fire, and if it was an expense to the city, that if we don't have that paragraph, we would have to spend that in other ways.
Okay. So I think that's helpful and clarifies it for me. So Madam Chair, if we can call for the vote, get the documents out, we'll be ready to go.
Okay, and certainly, Attorney Coleman, I just need to have some clarity. So it's without the 7G in there. Is that? I just want.
We're going to go forward with the IGA with 7G, and we're going to try to tweak the language between now and the proposed effective date of the IGA, so that we can accommodate the concerns that the cities may have. But the understanding is that in the agreement that I heard, is that if we're not able to reach some agreement on 7G language, tweaking it, then we'll delete 7G altogether, and the cities will have to pay us through some other means.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I heard Ms. Hampton say that she understood that.
Okay. Board of Commissioners, you heard the statement from the Attorney Coleman, and certainly I will just read the resolution and just include his statement without repeating everything. Board of Commissioners, we have a motion to approve the resolution of the Board of Commissioners calling for a referendum imposing 1% special purpose local option sales tax, which is a SPLOST, as authorized by the state of Georgia, and approval of related intergovernmental agreement, and authorize the chairman to sign all documents to include the statements that were rendered by our Attorney Coleman. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second? Do we have a second, board? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Vice Chairman Robinson, you have the floor.
Yeah, just one quick clarity. So what is the population of Douglas County and Douglas? Someone answer me. Staff?
Staff, your response. Deputy County Administrator, do you have that information?
Do you mean the percentages?
Yes, percentages.
Looking that information now.
The percentages that we have in the document, I can tell you, which I think are based on, everybody agrees the right percentages.
Just for the record, please. Want to go quick?
I
I'm
have
trying
it.
to,
And Michael,
go ahead.
Okay.
We've in the document, we've got 70.85% for Douglas County.
correct.
City of Austell is 0.09%. City of Douglasville is 24.02%. And the city of Villa Rica is 5.04%.
Okay. All right. So thank you. So we're roughly 70% of the population, and I'm just making a simple statement. So we both have projects. It was just entered into our record that there's a project in public safety that's trying to be accommodated at the city. A simulation for their police force. Likewise, the county has that for the sheriff. Now, you got the same thing, probably going to cost about the same amount of money, but yet we're 7% of the population. Right, so what was rendered in as to, it sounds like a prioritization statement was made earlier when we give accommodation. I just said, like, okay, now, what did I just hear? I'm in conflict. I've got to take care of the sheriff. Right, so you got two existing projects that are the same. And you would think that it would be whatever service delivery. I know that's not here, but it's how are y'all gonna do this? This is a capital project. Why you gonna have both? They both going west. I mean, just with that was the only reason I'm pausing, because of just what was stated earlier, but I did not know. But to hear the record, I'm like, okay, now, okay. That's a major sticking point for me, but duly noted. I'm going to go ahead and yield, Madam Chair. We got to go. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion, board?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Copeland?
thank you so much. So I just want to make sure for clarity that that what is moving forward will be based on population, the population numbers that Ms. Miller just reflected. That's what will be inside of this referendum, or that's how the disbursements will be made. 70% of the proceeds will go to the county, 24% will go towards the city of Douglasville, 5% will go to the city of Villa Rica, and 0.9% to the city of Austell.
Yes, that's correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
7.85 for the county.
Okay. 70.85. Okay, and that's based on population, because that's the fairest way for us to disperse those revenue funds, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And that's that way the cities and the counties and residents within side of each of those jurisdictions will be properly taken care of based on those percentages, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
Okay.
So now that I'm listening to that, I am hopeful then that the cities of Villa Rica, Austell, and Douglasville, when we are negotiating the SDS and loss, we'll take a look at those too. Because again, if it's good enough for SPLOST, it's good enough for service delivery strategy and for the local option sales tax to ensure that there is fair and transparency across all segments of government as we serve the citizens, both inside the county and the city. So with that, Madam Chair, I yield.
Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner Carthen. Any other discussion, board, before we go forward? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor, board. We have a motion and a second. When I call your districts, please respond. District 1.
Yes.
District 2.
Yes, ma'am.
District 3.
Yes.
District 4.
Yes.
Chairman, yes. We have a 5-0 unanimous vote and the motion carries. So with that being said, thank you, Board of Commissioners. We've addressed the need this morning, and it's very time sensitive. So I appreciate you coming in to render a vote and just yield your voice this morning. If there's nothing else to come before this body, guess what? This meeting is adjourned, and thank you so much, Board of Commissioners.